Vanessa's eyes moved slowly down to Claire's 7-month belly. The corner of her mouth lifted slightly. I am terminating your contract. Effective immediately. Claire did not blink. I have not heard a reason yet, Miss Caldwell. The reason is standing right in front of me. Vanessa swept a cold gaze from head to toe. My wedding requires someone who is fully present, not someone counting down to a due date. Claire's voice stayed as flat and smooth as the marble floor beneath their feet. You are breaching a 40-page contract, Miss Caldwell. Vanessa smiled faintly and turned away. My attorney will handle it. So will mine. One beat of silence. Then Claire looked down at the gleaming floor beneath her. This building, this very room where 6 years ago she had worn a white dress and danced until her feet ached at her own wedding reception. With the man Vanessa was about to marry, she does not know. She has absolutely no idea who she just fired. What happens when the woman who was betrayed, dismissed, and written off turns out to be the only one with the power to watch it all fall apart? The full story is waiting for you right below, and trust me, you will not want to stop at the first chapter. The first sound Claire Merritt heard when she walked into the grand ballroom of the Whitmore Hotel was the click of expensive heels on marble. Sharp, deliberate, getting louder, coming from the far corridor. She stopped in the center of the room and let the space settle around her. The ceiling was 40 feet above her head. Gold trim caught the afternoon light pouring through 3 arched windows on the east wall. The floor beneath her feet was cream and pale gold marble, the kind of surface that made every footstep sound like a declaration. On a Saturday evening with 400 guests, this room breathed differently, warmer, fuller, alive in a way that made the air taste like champagne and cut flowers. Right now it was still and cold and smelled like polish and lilies and the particular neutrality of a room waiting to be told what it was supposed to be. Claire had been in this room before. She did not think about that right now. She checked her watch. 1:53 in the afternoon, 7 minutes until the walkthrough. Her tablet was fully charged. Her binder contained 2 sets of revised floor plan options, cross-referenced vendor timelines, and a contingency note about the floral delivery schedule she intended to flag in the first 10 minutes of the meeting. She was ready. She was always ready. The woman who came around the corner from the east corridor was dressed like someone who had already won an argument before it started. Ivory blazer, structured and sharp at the shoulders. Gold earrings, small and precise. Hair that had taken someone an hour to arrange into something that looked effortless. Nude heels, 4 inches, the kind you learn to walk in before you learn to ride a bicycle or not at all. Vanessa Caldwell was 31 years old. She stopped 6 feet from Claire. She looked at her face. Then, with no effort at all to conceal it, her eyes moved to Claire's stomach. She was 7 months pregnant. The fact of it was not small. Something moved across Vanessa's face. It organized itself quickly into a decision. You are the planner, Vanessa said. Not a question. Claire Merritt, Claire replied, owner of Merritt and Company Events. I believe we are scheduled at 2 o'clock. She kept her voice easy and warm. I am a few minutes early. How far along? Vanessa asked. Her eyes had not moved from Claire's stomach. 7 months. Vanessa repeated the words slowly, the way you repeat a price that is insulting to your intelligence. Then she turned toward the service entrance, where the venue coordinator was hovering near the door. Janet, Vanessa said. Janet Pearson, who had worked with Claire across 12 events over 5 years, took one careful step forward. Yes, Miss Caldwell, Janet said. When did you confirm this booking? Vanessa asked. The contract came through 8 days ago, Janet replied. Your events coordinator approved the terms on the Wednesday. I am not asking about terms, Vanessa said. I am asking why no one flagged the situation before this walkthrough. Claire waited. She was very good at waiting. She had learned it the hard way, over years, in rooms where the person with the loudest voice assumed they were also the most important person present. She had learned to be still, to let silence fill in after someone finished performing, to choose her words with the same deliberate care she brought to choosing table linens, with intention. After looking at everything available, my pregnancy has no bearing on the quality of service I provide, Claire said. Her voice was level, steady. My team has planned over 300 events, 12 of them in the past 7 months. The Merritt and Company portfolio speaks directly to our capacity and our standards. This is not a birthday party, Vanessa said. She finally turned back to face Claire. The look in her eyes was not hostile. It was something more absolute than hostility. It was dismissive in the specific way that belongs to people who have always been powerful. Not mean, exactly. Just completely certain of its own correctness. The Hargrove Caldwell wedding is the most significant society event of this season, Vanessa said. 400 guests, full press presence. I require a planner who can be fully present, 24 hours a day, on call, on site when necessary, given your situation. My situation, Claire said carefully, is that I am a functioning professional in excellent health, with a team of 6 people I have personally trained. They are more than capable of supporting any element of this event that might require additional on-site presence in my final weeks. I have made my decision. Flat. Final. The way a door closes in a house where the conversation is over. Vanessa turned back toward Janet and began discussing the centerpiece height for the head table, as if Claire had already dematerialized, as if the woman standing in the center of the room had simply ceased to be worth addressing. Claire looked down at the marble floor beneath her feet, the cream and gold of it. The specific way afternoon light cut across the surface at this angle. She knew this floor. She had stood on it in different shoes, in a different dress, in a different life. She had stood on it and felt her heart catch in her chest at how beautiful the room looked when it was full of people who loved her. She filed that thought. She would return to it later. There is a breach of contract clause, Claire said. Her voice was very quiet, but it was not small. There was a difference between quiet and small. She had spent the last 2 years learning to know that difference from the inside out. Vanessa paused, a half turn. Something moved in her face. Not alarm, not quite, but the beginning of a recalculation. My attorney will handle the administrative details, Vanessa said, and turned away again. So will mine, Claire replied. She gathered her tablet. She placed her binder in her bag. She walked to the elevator bank at the south end of the ballroom and pressed the call button. She stood with her back straight and her eyes forward while she waited. The elevator doors opened. She stepped in. She pressed the lobby button. She watched the doors close on the room, then she closed her eyes. Okay. The elevator hummed downward. The lobby was bright and warm and smelled like the white roses in the tall vases near the reception desk. Those roses. She had recommended them to this hotel's event director 2 years ago, and the hotel had kept using them ever since. She walked through the revolving door into the October afternoon. Cold air, exhaust fumes, the sharp clarity of fallen leaves, and the charcoal warmth of a pretzel cart on the corner. She walked 2 blocks east without stopping, into the parking garage, down the ramp to level 3. She found her car. She got in. She put both hands on the steering wheel. She sat. Outside the concrete wall, she could hear the city doing what it always did. A horn, the thin, high wail of a siren fading west. Somewhere below her, the deep mechanical rumble of the ventilation system. This was the mirror moment. This was the thing she would remember later when everything else had resolved itself into the past. Not the firing, not Vanessa's eyes moving to her stomach, but this. The parking garage, the cold wheel under her palms. The way she sat there for 11 minutes and did not call anyone, and did not perform anything for anyone, and was simply a woman in a car on level 3, breathing. She looked at her phone. Lock, unlock, lock. She looked at Donna's name in her contacts. She looked at Cole's. She decided not to call either of them. Not yet. She needed 11 minutes to be nobody's anything. Just herself. Just here. The baby moved. A slow roll, side to side. I know, Claire said softly, I know. She put her right hand on her stomach. The parking garage smelled like exhaust and damp concrete, and faintly, the coffee from someone's car 2 spaces over. After 11 minutes, she counted them. She picked up her phone and called Donna Farrell. 2 rings. How did the walkthrough go? Donna asked. Her voice was warm and already slightly suspicious because she had been slightly suspicious since this contract came in, for reasons she could not quite name yet. She fired me, Claire said. Silence. She fired, Donna began. She stopped. She started again. She what? Vanessa Caldwell, Claire said. She terminated the contract, said she needed someone fully available and my pregnancy was a liability. She said it in front of Janet Pearson and 2 of her own junior staff. The silence on Donna's end lasted 4 full seconds. For Donna, who never stopped talking, 4 seconds was a very significant amount of time to say nothing at all. Okay, Donna said finally. Where are you? Parking garage, Claire said. Level 3, stay there. The sound of Donna's keyboard came through the phone. Fast, deliberate, a brief silence. Then, in a slightly different voice, very even and very careful, she said, Claire, what is the groom's full name on the intake form? Claire frowned. The contract says N. Hargrove. Nathaniel Hargrove. She paused. Why are you asking that in that particular voice? Donna did not answer immediately. Donna, Claire said. I am looking something up, Donna replied. Nathaniel Hargrove, 38 years old, Hargrove Development Group, office on 57th Street, previously married. Do not, Claire said. The word came out before she finished thinking it. Donna stopped. A long silence fell between them. 2 women in 2 different places holding a piece of information between them that neither of them had been expecting today. In the garage below her, a car started up. The sound bounced off the concrete walls and then faded as it drove up the ramp toward the street. She does not know who I am, Claire said. No, Donna said very quietly. I do not think she does. Claire stared at the concrete ceiling above her. There was a water stain in the corner. It was shaped like nothing in particular. Just a dark mark where something had seeped through. Brenda took the intake call, Claire said. Yes, Donna replied. Client was listed as Vanessa Caldwell Bride, groom as N. Hargrove. No one had any reason to. She paused. Claire, are you okay? Claire sat with the question. It was a real question. It deserved a real answer. I do not know yet, she said honestly. That is fair, Donna replied. What I know, Claire said, is that she breached a 40-page contract with a very specific penalty clause. And I need you to send everything to Arthur right now. A pause. Short. Then Donna said something that was half a laugh and half something much older and much more fierce. There she is, Donna said quietly. Send it to Arthur, Claire said. Already attaching, Donna replied. Claire turned the key in the ignition. The car hummed to life. The heat came on and the warm air carried the faint sweetness of the peppermint she kept in the cup holder. She pulled out of level 3 slowly, up the ramp, into the October afternoon, into a Tuesday that had become, without warning or preparation, something else entirely. She drove home without the radio on. That was how Cole knew something was wrong. She always had something playing in the car, a podcast, a playlist, anything. Silence was never comfortable to her the way it was to him. She filled it the way she filled rooms with particular warmth and intention. He heard the front door open at 4:30 in the afternoon. He came out of his home office, pencil still in hand, and found her standing in the front hallway with her bag still on her shoulder and her coat still fully buttoned, looking at nothing in particular. Hey, he said. Hey, she replied. He looked at her. You need tea, he said. I need to sit down first, she replied. She sat at the kitchen table. He put the kettle on. He did not ask anything yet. He had learned over 18 months together that there was a specific sequence to how Claire processed difficult things. The sequence required a certain amount of stillness before it would accept information going in the other direction. He sat across from her and waited. She told him what happened. She started with Vanessa's heels on the marble. She moved through the dismissal in precise, organized sentences. She finished with the name on the contract. Cole was quiet for a moment after she finished. Nathaniel, he said. Yes, she replied. She did not know who you were, he said. Apparently not, she replied. He nodded slowly. The kettle began its low whistle. He got up, made the tea, chamomile because she was 7 months pregnant and it was late afternoon, and set the mug in front of her. He sat back down. How are you doing, he asked. I am thinking about the contract, she said. Claire, he said. I am thinking about the contract, she said again. Steadier this time. There is a specific breach penalty. 48 hours to cure. If they do not cure, meaning they either rehire me or agree to a mutual termination in good faith, we are looking at the full contract value plus damages. It is how Arthur wrote it. It is how I always ask him to write it. Okay, Cole said. That is good. She fired me in front of Janet Pearson, Claire said. Janet has worked with me since the Whitmore partnership began. Janet was at the Bergman wedding, the Ostrander gala. She stopped, pressed her lips together, started again. She fired me in front of someone I have built a professional relationship with for 5 years, and she did it like I was not in the room. Cole watched her face. She did not look at my face, Claire said. She looked at my stomach, and then she made a decision based on that. The kitchen was quiet around them. Late afternoon sun cut through the window above the sink and landed in a long, warm rectangle on the floor tiles. She does not know you were married to him, Cole said. No, Claire replied. And you did not know it was him, he said. I did not know until Donna pulled the file, Claire said. She looked down at the mug, steam rising in a thin curl. Brenda took the intake call. The contract said N. Hargrove. I reviewed the scope and the timeline. I did not look at the groom's full name. I always look at the complete client file before a venue walkthrough. I did not today. She stopped. I had 3 other calls this morning. I trusted Brenda's intake notes. I walked into that room without knowing. That is not a mistake, Cole said carefully. That is just Tuesday. She almost laughed. Almost. It is Nathaniel, she said. And this time the name landed differently, not as information, as something older. Something with weight and history and the specific texture of years. Cole reached across the table and put his hand over hers. He did not say anything. He did not try to fix it or frame it or tell her how she was supposed to feel about it. He just put his hand over hers and kept it there, still and warm and completely certain. This was the breathing room she needed. Not words, just this, his hand, the kitchen, the mug of chamomile. The sun moving slowly across the tiles. She had loved things about Nathaniel. She wanted to be honest about that, even now, even to herself. There had been real things in the beginning, so many real things. The way he laughed in actual delight when something surprised him. Weekend trips where he turned his phone off entirely and belonged only to those 2 days. The way he had looked at her across a crowded room at their engagement party like she was the only still point in a turning world. She had loved him. And then the years passed, and the space between them filled with what it always fills with when people stop paying attention. Work and routine and assumption and the particular distance that grows when 2 people stop asking each other real questions. She had poured herself into building merit and company. He had poured himself into the next acquisition, the next development, the next deal. They had become excellent roommates who remembered each other's coffee orders. She had thought that was enough. She had been wrong. You are thinking about before, Cole said. Not a question. A little, she replied. That is allowed, he said. She looked at him. He had an open face. Not unguarded, exactly, but genuinely present in a way that Nathaniel had been in the beginning, before the distance had grown too wide to see across. Cole had never given her the distance. Sometimes she still waited for it, the way you wait for the other shoe when you have heard it drop too many times. But it never came. She is planning her wedding in the room where I had my reception, Claire said, with the man I was married to, and she hired me to plan it, and then fired me for being pregnant. She paused. There is a particular kind of irony that requires no additional decoration. There really is, Cole agreed. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. Arthur Penwick. The message said, "Received the file, reviewing now. We'll call at 6. Good, she said. She looked at Cole. I need to go through the full vendor list, she said. I need to understand the complete scope of what she owes us and what our exposure is if she counters. Of course you do, he said. He moved from his chair to the one beside her. His arm went around her shoulder, easy, undemanding. Do you want to think out loud while I make dinner? She leaned into him just slightly. What are you making? She asked. The soup, he said. Which one? She asked. The only one that matters, he replied. She almost laughed again. And this time it was closer. It was real at the edges. Upstairs, an hour later, she sat at her desk with the full Hargrove Caldwell intake file open on her screen. The room smelled like Cole's soup from downstairs and the faint cedar of the bookshelf behind her. Outside, the city was settling into the amber light of early evening. She read through the file. The date of the event was November 17th. The venue was the Whitmore Hotel Grand Ballroom. Guest count 412. Budget $280,000. Contract value for Merritt and Company, $162,000. Covering coordination, vendor management, timeline oversight, and full day of execution. 3 weeks remaining. She scrolled to the vendor tab. The florist was Wren Florals, her account. A relationship built over 7 years. The caterer was Bentley and Cross. She had placed 3 events with them this year alone. The string quartet booked for cocktail hour was Fisher Strings, and their manager, Carol Fisher, was someone Claire had personally recommended to this hotel 2 seasons ago. Every single vendor on this list had come through Merritt and Company. She sat with that for a moment. Her phone rang. Arthur. Tell me, she said. The contract is watertight, Arthur replied. She could hear him smiling through the phone. Breach clause is explicit. 48 hours to cure, after which the full contract value plus 25% damages becomes immediately due. There is also a professional disparagement clause in Section 9. He paused. And based on what Donna sent me in the last hour. What did Donna send you? Claire asked. She did not call you yet, he replied. She was going to call at, Claire began. She looked at the time. 5:57. What did she send you, Arthur? Call her first, he said. She called Donna. Donna answered immediately. I found the posts, Donna said. Her voice had that specific tone, the one that meant she was angry on Claire's behalf in a way she was working hard to keep from catching fire before the proper time. She posted in a private Facebook group, Society Wives, New York chapter. She said she had been working with an overrated boutique planner who showed up visibly incapacitated. She did not name the company directly, but she tagged the venue. And the venue tagged Merritt and Company in a reply 3 days ago. Claire sat very still. How many people are in this group, she asked. About 2,000, Donna replied. Give or take, 2,000 women. Upper income, well-connected. The exact demographic that hired wedding planners and recommended them to their daughters and their daughters' friends. Screenshots, Claire said. Saved, time-stamped, and forwarded to Arthur's inbox 17 minutes ago, Donna replied. Good, Claire said. She looked at the vendor list on her screen. She looked at the name Nathaniel Hargrove at the top of the contract. She thought, I am not helpless. That was the first sentence she had written in the journal she started after the divorce. The very first one. Not a question. A statement. She had written it on a bad night and read it every single morning for 6 weeks until it became something she no longer needed to be reminded of. She did not need reminding now, but it was good to hear, even just in her own head. She did not sleep well that night. At 2 in the morning, she gave up pretending. She sat up slowly so as not to wake Cole, found her robe hanging on the back of the door, and padded downstairs to the kitchen. She made herbal tea she did not drink. She sat at the table with her phone face down in front of her. The kitchen smelled like the remnants of Cole's soup and the particular still dark smell of a house in the middle of the night. Dust and quiet and the faint ghost of someone's life going on inside it. She thought about the grand ballroom, not Vanessa in it. Not Nathaniel planning his second wedding in the room where they had celebrated their first. Not the breach or the vendor list or Arthur's calm, satisfied voice on the phone. She thought about the night Nathaniel proposed. They were 30 and 28 years old. He had taken her to a restaurant overlooking the Hudson River, and the city had been lit up in a way that made everything look as though someone had specifically arranged it for the occasion. He had gotten down on one knee, which she had not expected, because he was not typically a man who did things the expected way. She had cried. She also had not expected that. The ring was too big. They had it resized 3 times before they finally got it right. She had been so happy. That was the part you could not tell people without it sounding like an accusation. She had been genuinely, comprehensively happy. It had not been a performance. It had not been a compromise. She had loved that man with the clear, uncomplicated love of someone who believes they have found the person they want to build a life with, and she had believed absolutely that he felt the same. For a while, she thought he did. Their first year of marriage had been good, better than good. They had renovated the townhouse on the Upper West Side together. They had traveled. Barcelona in March, a week in Maine in August, where they had both read actual books and cooked actual meals. And she had thought, lying in the sun on the porch, this is the version of life I want forever. She had poured herself into Merit and Company. He had supported it at first enthusiastically. He attended her launch event, told his colleagues, sent her clients she would never have reached otherwise. She had been grateful. Later, she would understand that his enthusiasm had been the kind that peaks and then settles the way water always finds its level. He stopped asking about the work. Then he stopped referencing it. Then it became very quietly something she did that he accommodated rather than something he was proud of. She had started to feel like a furniture arrangement he had grown accustomed to. She told her therapist this. Her therapist was a measured woman named Dr. Graham, who never told her how to feel but asked exceptional questions. "When did you first notice that?" Dr. Graham had asked. "Probably a year and a half in," Claire had replied. "Maybe 2 years." "And what did you do with the noticing?" Dr. Graham asked. "I thought it was work stress," Claire replied. "I thought it was a season. I thought I was being too sensitive." "You are being too sensitive." He had said that to her, not constantly, not in the way that accumulates into something you can name. Just occasionally, always in a gentle tone, always in a context where she had been trying to tell him that something was wrong. Gentle enough that she kept second-guessing the things she had been trying to say. She had not been too sensitive. She had been right. Now she sat at her kitchen table at 2 in the morning and looked at the steam rising from a mug of tea she was not going to drink. She had found out about Vanessa on a Thursday in November 2 years ago, almost exactly to the week. She had come home early from a site visit. She had found not what she expected, not something cinematic, not something obvious, but a single earring on the bathroom counter. Small gold. Not hers. Resting beside the soap dish like it had every right to be there, she had picked it up, she had held it in her palm. She had stood in her own bathroom for a long time. And then she had put it back down and sat on the edge of the bathtub and thought very quietly, I already knew. That was the part that took her the longest to forgive herself for. Not staying, not the patient years. But that moment of recognizing, in the simple weight of a gold earring against her palm, that she had known for a long time. She had simply chosen not to look directly at it. This was the universal realization moment, the one that every woman who has ever second-guessed her own certainty would recognize. You knew. You knew before you were ready to know. And you spent so long telling yourself you were imagining things that by the time the evidence arrived, it almost felt like relief. Almost. Her phone screen lit up on the table. A text from Donna. It was 2:17 in the morning. Donna cannot sleep either. Arthur says the disparagement clause alone is worth $60,000. A pause. Then, how are you doing? Claire typed back, I am thinking, Donna, about him. Claire looked at the question for a moment. Then she typed about before. About how long I spent convincing myself I was wrong about something I was completely right about. 3 dots appeared, stopped, appeared again. Donna, I know. I watched you do it. I did not say anything because it was not my place. I have felt bad about that every single day since. Claire, it was not yours to say. Donna, I know. Still, a pause. Donna, for what it is worth, she hired you by accident. The person who actually referred her to us was Margaret Hargrove. Claire stared at her phone. She read that sentence 3 times. What? Donna, Arthur found it in the intake records, the referral source field. 2 letters, MH. We always ask how clients found us. Brenda must have entered it at intake, and neither of us looked at it. The referral came from Margaret Hargrove. The kitchen was very quiet. Margaret, 64 years old, silver-haired, wore lavender almost exclusively. Made the best lemon cake Claire had ever eaten. Had held Claire's hand at the lawyer's office the day after she asked Nathaniel for a divorce. I am so sorry, Margaret had said that day. I should have done more. She had meant it in a way that was specific and particular, the way apologies are when they know exactly what they are apologizing for. Margaret Hargrove had sent her daughter-in-law's replacement to Merritt and Company, without telling Vanessa who Claire Merritt was. Claire sat with that for a long time. Then she typed, does Nathaniel know? Donna, no idea. Arthur thinks not. Margaret apparently acts alone. Claire set her phone down. She looked at the untouched mug of tea still warm. She picked it up and drank it. The baby shifted. A slow, rolling movement that Claire had come to associate with this particular hour of the night. The hour when everything else was quiet enough for her presence to fill the silence. Claire put her hand on her stomach. "Your grandmother is something else," she said softly. Then caught herself because Margaret Hargrove was not going to be this baby's grandmother. Cole's parents would be. That was the life she was building now, not the one she had left behind. But still, Margaret. She thought about calling her. She did not. It was 2:30 in the morning. That conversation would need daylight to hold its shape. She went back upstairs. She settled carefully into her side of the bed. Cole reached for her without waking, one warm hand finding her back. She closed her eyes. She thought about the woman she had been 4 years ago, in that restaurant by the Hudson, wearing a ring that needed resizing, believing she had found exactly what she was looking for. She thought about the woman she was now, in a different bed, in a different city, in the same city. 7 months pregnant with someone who had never once made her feel like a furniture arrangement. I was not wrong to love him, she thought. I was just wrong to think that loving someone makes you safe from them. She breathed in. She breathed out. The baby settled. She slept. At 9 the following morning, her phone rang. She was on her second cup of decaffeinated coffee going through vendor emails when she saw the number. She recognized it the way you recognize certain numbers. Before you are ready to. With your whole body before your mind. Area code 917. Connecticut Exchange, Margaret Hargrove, she answered. Claire, Margaret said. Her voice was the same. It was exactly the same as the last time Claire had heard it, 2 years ago in a lawyer's office on Park Avenue. Margaret, Claire replied. A short silence. Then Margaret said, I imagine Donna found the referral field. She did, Claire replied. Margaret said nothing for a moment. Through the phone, Claire could hear the particular sound of a large, quiet house in Connecticut. Birds, distance, the faint creak of old floor settling. She came to me, Margaret said finally. Vanessa. She was desperate. Her original planner had walked out 3 weeks before the wedding. She needed someone who could be trusted to do the work at the level this event required. A pause. I thought of you immediately. And you did not tell her who I was, Claire said. No, Margaret replied. I did not. Why not, Claire asked. Another pause, longer. Because I wanted her to have the best person available, Margaret said. And because I thought perhaps, if she worked with you for 3 weeks, she might understand something she has been choosing not to understand. She stopped. I am not certain I thought that far ahead, honestly. Some things you do because they feel correct, and you examine the reasoning afterward. Claire leaned back in her chair. She fired me, Claire said. I know, Margaret replied. Her voice was quiet. Vanessa called me last night to say she had let the planner go. She did not mention why. She never asked me who I had referred her to. She assumed any referral from me would be someone she approved of. She has not made the connection, Claire said. No, Margaret replied. She does not know your name, Claire. I do not think she was ever particularly curious about the details of Nathaniel's marriage. It was easier not to be. That sentence sat in the air between them. It was easier not to be. Claire had thought about this before, the specific comfort of not asking questions whose answers would complicate things. She had practiced that comfort herself. For years, before a small gold earring ended it forever. Does Nathaniel know I was the planner? Claire asked. I have not spoken to him about it, Margaret replied. He is in Dubai until next week. Okay, Claire said. Claire. Margaret's voice shifted. Something softer came into it, something that had been waiting for permission to arrive. I am so sorry for what happened. Both things. The marriage and this. A pause. I should have done more at the time. I knew something was wrong for longer than I admitted to myself, and I chose to be accommodating. I told myself it was not my place to interfere. Another pause. I have thought about that a great deal over the past 2 years. Claire looked out the window. The October sky was a pale gray blue, the kind of sky that was still deciding whether to be cold or beautiful. It was not your place, she said. Not really. No, Margaret agreed. But there are things we can say even when they are not strictly our place to say. And there are things we say too late to do any good. She paused. I wanted you to have the contract. I wanted your business to benefit from this wedding even if I was not able to give you anything else. A small thing, a late thing, but mine to give. Claire was quiet for a moment. She owes me a breach penalty, Claire said finally. My attorney will handle it. I suspected as much, Margaret said. And Claire could hear something in the old woman's voice that was very close to satisfaction. Good, she said simply. They said goodbye. Claire held the phone after she set it down. She thought about the 4 years of that marriage, the real parts and the hollow parts and the long middle years when she could not tell which was which. She thought about the way she had built Merritt and Company during those years quietly, with intention, the way you build things when you are the only one who knows how much they matter. The business had been hers from the beginning. Even when she was someone's wife. Even when she was someone's ex-wife. Even when she was sitting in a parking garage on level 3 counting 11 minutes. It had always been hers. She got back to work. At 11 that morning, Arthur called. I sent the formal breach notice at 9:15, Arthur said. Certified delivery, email with read receipt. Copy to the registered agent for Caldwell Hargrove Enterprises, which is the entity that signed the contract. A pause. The 48-hour cure window opens now. What does cure look like at this point? Claire asked. They would have to reinstate you as lead planner, Arthur replied. Given that they fired you 3 weeks before the event, that is their only cure option. They cannot retroactively make it not a breach. So the question is whether they will reinstate you. They will not, Claire said. No, Arthur agreed, which means in 48 hours the full contract value plus 25% damages becomes due. He paused. There is also the disparagement claim from the Facebook posts. That one is worth pursuing separately. The posts have not been taken down. They have had overnight engagement. Claire put her pen down on the desk. Overnight engagement, she said. The original post was shared into a second group, Arthur replied. A larger one, NYC Events and Entertaining. Membership of approximately 12,000. As of 8 this morning, approximately 300 comments. Most speculating about which planner she means. A few have guessed correctly. A pause. Someone named Marjorie Wells tagged Merritt & Company directly in the comments. Her comment says if it is Merritt & Company, she will never book another event in this city again. She called Claire Merritt extraordinary and called whoever fired her an absolute fool. Claire sat down on the edge of her chair. Marjorie Wells, she said. She referred 8 clients to us in the past 3 years. I know, Arthur replied. I have reviewed your referral records. A pause. Claire. The business exposure here is significant, but what is equally significant is the potential upside if this is handled correctly and with patience. I am not interested in a public fight, she said. I know, Arthur replied, and I am not recommending one. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply enforce your contract, quietly, completely, and allow the story to find its own level. She looked out the window. The October sky was clearing, pale sun pushing through the remaining cloud. Send a second notice, she said, to Vanessa Caldwell personally, not just the registered agent. Make sure the penalty figure is fully itemized. And Arthur. She paused. Add a line about the social media posts, not aggressive, just factual. Note the date, the reach, the specific language. Put it on the record. Done by noon, Arthur said. Thank you, she replied. She hung up. She sat at the kitchen table for a moment in the late morning quiet. She was angry. She wanted to name it clearly because she had spent too many years mistaking anger for irrationality and dismissing it before it could tell her anything useful. She was angry that a woman who did not know her name had looked at her body and made a decision. She was angry that Vanessa had used social media to undermine her reputation in a community where reputation was literally the currency of the work. She was angry that she had walked into that room completely unprepared, because for once in her meticulous professional life, she had not reviewed the complete file. She was angry at the specific unfairness of a universe that had arranged for her to be fired by the woman who replaced her in the room where she had been a bride, with 3 weeks left on the calendar. She let herself be angry, cleanly, without deciding what to do with it yet. You were not too sensitive. You were right. You have always been right when it counted. Then she opened her laptop and got back to work. Donna called at 10:30 that evening. Claire was on the couch with her feet elevated, which was where her obstetrician had gently suggested she spend most evenings at this point in the pregnancy. 7 months and 3 weeks now. The baby had moved lower in the past week. She felt it in different places than she had a month ago. The vendor situation is starting to move, Donna said. Claire sat up a little straighter. What is happening? Wren Florals cannot do the flowers, Donna said. Catherine Wren called Vanessa's new coordinator this afternoon. Said they have a prior commitment conflict on November 17th that their system had missed at time of booking. A pause. She called me 30 seconds after she called them. She wanted me to know. Claire was quiet. Fisher Strings also called, Donna continued. Carol Fisher says the quartet has a standing offer for a recording session that day they had apparently forgotten about. Both of them called you, Claire said. Before they called anyone else, Donna confirmed. Claire had not asked either of them to do this. She had said nothing to anyone about the breach, about Vanessa, about any of it beyond the legal channels. What Donna was describing was not a campaign. It was not coordination. It was simply the natural movement of a professional network built on 7 years of genuine goodwill. Is Bentley in cross-holding? Claire asked. So far, Donna replied. Tom Bentley says his contract with the Caldwell event is separate from his relationship with us, and he is not inclined to break it on our behalf. He said, and I am quoting him directly, Claire would never ask me to do that. A pause. He is right. He is, Claire agreed. The florist and the strings are not acting on your request in any material sense, Donna said. They are making their own choices. But I think they are making those choices because of who you are to them professionally. This was the accumulated interest on 7 years of professional decency. Not manufactured, not engineered. Simply what happens when you do the work correctly and treat people like they matter. It comes back to you, not all at once, not with fanfare. Just quietly in the way that real things move. Any word on the replacement planner they hired, Claire asked. Paulette Gaines, Donna replied. Brooklyn-based. Decent reputation but not the level this event requires. She called me this afternoon, said she wanted to extend professional courtesy and ask whether there were any specific site notes she should be aware of. A pause. I told her she was welcome to the intake documents that were part of our contractual deliverables. I sent them over. You sent her our work product, Claire said. Our contractual deliverables, Donna replied. The material we are legally required to transfer, not our vendor relationships, not our contingency plans, not the 6 hours of proprietary timeline work we completed before Vanessa fired you. A pause. But yes, I was professional about it, because that is what you would have done. Yes, Claire said. That is exactly what I would have done. They were quiet for a moment. Claire, Donna said. Her voice shifted, the underneath the professionalism voice. The one Claire had learned to listen for over 15 years of friendship. How are you actually doing? I am fine, Claire said. Okay, Donna replied, a pause. Donna, Claire said, I am fine. I know, Donna replied, I know you are. Get some rest. The call ended. Cole was working late. He had a project presentation in the morning and had gone back to the office after dinner. The house was quiet around her. Claire sat on the couch in the quiet. She thought about Vanessa in the ballroom, the way she had looked at Claire's stomach, not with hostility exactly, with something that was in some ways worse. The bored certainty of someone who has already decided what they are looking at before they have looked properly. She had been looked at that way before. Not often, but specifically. The way certain rooms had expectations about who belonged in them and where. The way being visibly pregnant, apparently, made you simultaneously the center of attention and completely beside the point. She was tired in a way that was not about sleep. She was 34 years old and 7 months pregnant, and she was tired of being underestimated. Tired of the mental calculations she had to run every single time she walked into a room where someone was deciding what category to put her in before she had said a single word. She was tired of needing to be exceptional, just to be taken seriously. And underneath that, underneath all the organizing and filing and legal precision, was a thought she had been avoiding for days. A thought she had been building paperwork walls against. She was scared. Not of Vanessa, not of the contract dispute. She was scared she had not healed the way she had spent 2 years telling herself she had. Scared that all the building and rebuilding, and the business and Cole and the baby had been, on some deep level, a very convincing performance of recovery rather than actual recovery. That the woman who had sat on the bathroom floor of that West Village apartment was still there somewhere, waiting. And that being fired by Nathaniel's fiancée in their wedding venue had cracked the performance just enough to let her back in. She got up from the couch. She went upstairs to the bathroom. She sat down on the floor, her back against the bathtub, feet flat on the cold tile. The bathroom smelled like lavender soap and Cole's shampoo. The overhead light was warm. The house was completely still except for the radiator's low, familiar knock. She put both hands on her stomach. She sat there and she did not cry yet, but she knew it was coming. On the 9th day, the breach notification period expired without cure. Vanessa Caldwell's attorney sent a letter claiming the contract had procedural ambiguities and requesting mediation rather than direct payment. Arthur replied within 6 hours. His reply was 4 pages long and contained the word unambiguous exactly 9 times. That evening, Donna called with the vendor update. 2 more had contacted her before contacting Vanessa's coordinator. The word was moving through the professional community the way professional words always moved, without anyone directing them. Simply finding their own level. And that night at 1 in the morning, Claire sat on the bathroom floor. Not because she planned to. Not because she made a decision about it. She had been folding onesies in the baby's room. Small yellow ones, then white, then the pale sage green, that Cole had picked out himself from a catalog he had studied with the same focused attention he brought to architectural drawings. She had been folding them with the seams perfectly aligned and stacking them in the drawer and taking them out and folding them again. She had done this 11 times in the past 2 weeks. She knew this. She did it anyway. Somewhere around the 3rd stack, she stopped pretending it was about the onesies. Cole had found her there at 2:45 in the morning, sitting on the floor of the baby's room with a stack of yellow sleepers in her lap. He had not made a sound. He had simply sat down on the floor beside her, his back against the crib, his shoulder against hers. They had sat like that in the dark for a long time without saying anything at all. Then she had gotten up and gone to the bathroom and sat down on the cold tile and finally let herself cry. Not the controlled, purposeful crying she had allowed herself occasionally over the past 2 years. Not the quick, efficient release she had learned to give herself in the shower before Cole woke up. This was something older and less organized. This was the thing underneath everything else. The thing she had been building walls against. I was so certain. The thought arrived whole, the way thoughts do at 2 in the morning when all the other noises stopped. I was so certain I knew what I had. I was so certain I knew who he was. I was so certain I was building the right life, and I was wrong about all of it. And I do not know how you trust your own judgment after that. I do not know how you stand in a room and feel certain of anything when you were that wrong about something that large. She sat on the cold tile and cried. For the marriage. For the version of herself who believed in it completely. For the way good things can be real and still not last. For the way you can love someone fully and still not be the right people for each other. For the specific cruelty of discovering that truth not through an honest conversation, but through a small gold earring on a bathroom counter. She cried for the years she had spent making herself smaller, not dramatically, just in the quiet way. The unasked questions, the second-guessed reactions, the careful moderation of her own certainty because she was afraid of seeming too sensitive. She cried for the version of herself that had used the words I think maybe at the beginning of sentences that deserved to begin with I know. She cried for a long time, and then after a while she stopped. She sat very still. The bathroom was exactly the same as before. Lavender soap, Cole's shampoo, the radiator's knock, nothing had changed around her. She took a slow breath, and then the baby kicked. Hard, 3 times, in rapid succession like a message in a language she did not have to translate. Claire laughed. It came out wet and ragged, but it was a real laugh. She looked down at her stomach. Okay, she said, okay, I hear you. She put her palm flat on the place where the kick had been. I hear you, she said again. Softer. This was the moment, this exact moment. Not the grand gesture, not the dramatic turning point. Just this, the cold tile, the warm weight of her palm on her own stomach. The baby's 3 hard kicks. Sometimes transformation arrives the way a baby kicks. Hard, 3 times. And you laugh instead of cry. And the laugh is more honest than anything else you have said in weeks. She sat there for another few minutes. Then she got up carefully. She ran cold water on her face. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were swollen. Her robe was slightly damp at the collar. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had been carrying something heavy and had just briefly set it down. She looked like a person. Just a person. Exactly as she was. She went to bed. Cole came in at 1 in the morning. She heard him move through the dark room, careful and quiet as he always was. He sat on his side of the bed. He put one hand on her shoulder, still and warm and not demanding anything at all. She did not pretend to be asleep. She turned over. He looked at her in the dark. He did not say anything. I cried, she said. Okay, he replied. On the bathroom floor, the cold tile, he said. Yes, she replied. He moved closer and put his arm around her. She settled against him, her head on his chest, his arm a steady weight across her back. Do you want to talk, he asked. Not right now, she said. Maybe tomorrow. Okay, replied. Then sleep. She closed her eyes. The baby was still now, settled. Present. Claire breathed in. And then she thought, clearly, without drama, without the heaviness of what had come before, I am not performing recovery. I was wrong about that. The crying was part of the recovery. You do not cry like that for something you have been performing. You cry like that for something real. She breathed out. She slept. The morning was different. She did not feel healed. She did not feel transformed. She felt like someone who had slept 8 hours after crying for 45 minutes on a cold bathroom floor, which meant she felt specifically and genuinely human. She made coffee. 1 cup, the only one she allowed herself. Cole had left early, but there was a note on the counter in his handwriting. Soup in the fridge. Call me whenever. With a small drawing of a bowl of soup underneath. He was an architect and could not stop illustrating even his personal notes. She smiled at that note for a full minute before she set it down. You are allowed to be loved like this. You built a life with someone who draws soup on his notes. That is not small. She sat at the kitchen table. She thought about the last 9 days, the precise and the organized, the filing, the legal calm, the careful management of everything she was feeling. She thought about last night, the floor, the crying, the baby's 3 hard kicks. She thought about Vanessa Caldwell in that ballroom, about Nathaniel planning his second wedding in her reception venue, about 400 guests and a $280,000 budget, and the whole elaborate machinery of a wedding that was supposed to be perfect. And she thought, I do not actually need anything from this except what I am already entitled to. The breach penalty, the disparagement claim, her contract enforced, her professional reputation intact. She did not need Vanessa to understand. She did not need Nathaniel to feel guilty. She did not need Margaret's late loyalty to make anything right. She did not need a reckoning or a public confrontation or a moment where everyone in the room finally understood who she was. She just needed to be exactly who she was. Completely. Unapologetically. Without qualifier. She picked up her phone and called Arthur. "Good morning," he said. "What is the timeline on the breach payment?" she said. "They have requested mediation as an alternative to direct payment," he replied. "We do not have to accept. If we decline, I file in civil court by end of business Friday." A pause. "Mediation would take longer but might be less adversarial." "File Friday," she said. A pause. "Understood," Arthur replied. "And Arthur," she said, "the disparagement claim. What is our strongest play?" "Document continued engagement with the posts," he replied. "I have been tracking it carefully. As of this morning, the original post has been shared 312 times. The second group it landed in has 12,000 members. Minimum 600 people who are specifically in the events and hospitality community in New York have seen this." A pause. "There is also a comment thread on an event industry discussion board. Someone traced it back to Merritt& Company." He paused again. "The comments are favorable. To you, notably and specifically favorable." "Forward the link," she said. "Done already," he replied. She hung up. She called Donna. "I need you to do something specific," Claire said. "Name it," Donna replied. "Draft a very short note," Claire said. "To all active and recent clients. Not about the breach. Not even implied. Just a note from me. Checking in on their upcoming events, making sure our team is exceeding expectations, thanking them for their continued trust." A pause. "Warm. Personal. Not defensive." "I can have it to you within an hour," Donna replied. "An hour is good," Claire said. And Donna pulled the inquiry emails from the past week. Anything new that came in. A pause. "There are 14 new inquiry emails since Tuesday," Donna said. Claire stopped. 14, Donna confirmed. "I was going to bring it up. I was not sure when the right moment was." A pause. 11 of them specifically mentioned the posts. "They say they heard about what happened and they want to work with us." 14 inquiries in 9 days from people who had followed the story through the Facebook posts. Vanessa had posted about Claire's alleged failings in a community of 12,000 women who cared deeply about events. And 12,000 women had, by and large, decided they wanted to hire the woman who had been dismissed. Claire sat with this for a moment. "Start responding," she said. "Priority order based on event date. Standard intake process." "Already started," Donna replied. The call ended. Claire sat very still. She had not manufactured this. She had not campaigned for it. She had simply done her work, built her relationships, enforced her contract, and gone home and cried on the bathroom floor and gotten up the next morning. And without asking for anything, the world had begun to correct the story on her behalf. There was a particular kind of justice in that. Not the loud kind, not the cinematic kind. The quiet kind that arrives slowly, built from accumulation, from the long compound interest of doing things right. She opened her inbox. She started reading. At noon, Donna called back. "She called me," Donna said. There was a specific quality to her voice. "Controlled, deliberately controlled." "Vanessa," Claire replied. "Yes," Donna said. "She called the main Merritt & Company line about 40 minutes ago. Asked to speak with management. I was management. She said she wanted to discuss the situation going forward and explore whether there was a path to a mutual resolution." "What did you say?" Claire asked. "I said all communications were being routed through our attorney per standard breach protocol," Donna replied. She went very quiet. Then she said, "I did not realize there would be an attorney involved." A pause. I said, "There is always an attorney involved when a 40-page contract is terminated without cause." She hung up. Claire smiled. It was a small smile, but it was genuine. "She is scared," Donna said. "Not of you specifically, I think, of what she does not understand." Also, Donna continued, "I am adding one more thing. Brenda found an email thread from 8 days ago, right after Vanessa signed the contract. She was forwarding the Merritt & Company intake confirmation to her friend group." A pause. The email says, "Had to use someone Margaret recommended. No idea who they are, but hopefully competent enough for the basics." Claire read those words in her mind. Competent enough for the basics. She had built Merritt & Company from a business plan she wrote on a yellow legal pad during the second year of her marriage. She had built it while being someone's wife. She had kept building it while learning how not to be. She had shown up for it when she was exhausted and sad and starting over and had no idea what the next year was going to look like. She had built over 300 events, 14 in the past 7 months. Competent enough for the basics. The anger was not explosive. It was not out of control. It was the clean, righteous anger of someone who knows exactly what they are worth and has just been told the opposite by someone who never bothered to look. "Save the email thread," Claire said. "Already in Arthur's inbox," Donna replied. Claire hung up. She put on her coat. She picked up her bag. She went to work. The Merritt & Company offices were on the 6th floor of a building on West 22nd Street. 3 offices, a conference room, a sample room filled with fabric swatches and centerpiece mock-ups and photographs from over 300 events. The whole place smelled like fresh flowers and coffee and the dry, settled warmth of a workspace that knew what it was for. Brenda Sutton met her at the elevator, holding a coffee she had clearly prepared 5 minutes before Claire arrived. Brenda had the specific gift of knowing when her boss coming even without a text. "I am so sorry," Brenda said. Her voice was genuine. "I should have flagged the groom's full name on the intake form." "There was no reason to flag it," Claire replied. "Hargrove is a name you did not know." "Still," Brenda said. "Brenda," Claire said. She took the coffee. "I need the full vendor timeline for the Hargrove Caldwell event. Not the complete planning documents, just the commitments. What has been paid, what is pending, what is locked." "On your desk in 10 minutes, Brenda replied. "Thank you," Claire said. She went to her office and sat down. She looked at the framed photographs on the wall. Not her own photographs, but her clients'. 62 framed moments from events she had planned. Couples, families, galas. The Whitmore Ballroom appeared 3 times. Twice for clients. And once in a photograph she had taken down 2 years ago and replaced with a hotel lobby shot from an anniversary party. She looked at those photographs for a long moment. Then she opened her laptop and got to work. She worked through the afternoon. Vendor confirmations. The timeline for the spring calendar, which was already filling with the new inquiries. A response email to the Hospital Foundation inquiry about the March Gala, which was the largest new piece of business and deserved her most personal attention. At 4 in the afternoon, her phone rang. 917 area code, Connecticut. Margaret again. "I heard from Nathaniel this morning," Margaret said. Her voice was more careful than the last time. Claire sat up straighter. "He is back from Dubai." "He called me from Dubai," Margaret replied. "He saw something. A reference to a story about a wedding planner dismissed from a major New York wedding. He asked if I knew anything about it." "What did you tell him?" Claire asked. "I told him," Margaret said, "that I had referred Vanessa to Merritt and Company, and that Merritt and Company was your firm." Claire waited. "He was quiet for a long time," Margaret continued. "Then he asked me why I had not told him, and I told him the truth. That I thought it was the right thing to do, that I trust your work, that I believed eventually Vanessa would have the experience of working with you and understand something about who she had helped displace." A pause. "I was not wrong that she would eventually meet you. I was perhaps mistaken in my reasoning about what would follow." "She did not recognize me," Claire said. "She did not know my name. She looked at a pregnant woman she had already decided was not worth dealing with." "Yes," Margaret said quietly. "I am aware of that. That is its own kind of information about who she is." "Nathaniel knows now," Claire said. "He knows you were the planner she hired and fired," Margaret replied. "He knows about the breach claim. He knows about the posts." A pause. "He was extremely upset, specifically about the posts." Claire was quiet. "He is going to call you," Margaret said. "He told me he was going to. I am calling first because I did not want you to be blindsided." "I appreciate that," Claire said. Another pause. "Claire," Margaret said. Her voice was different now, the voice underneath the Connecticut composure. "I watched my son make a terrible choice. I watched it happen slowly, and I told myself it was not my business. And then I watched you handle the aftermath with more grace than I would have managed, and I thought." She stopped, started again. "You deserved a mother-in-law who said the hard things when they needed to be said. I was not that person. I am sorry." Claire held the phone. The office around her was quiet. The late afternoon light came through the window at a long, warm angle. She could smell the coffee from the kitchen down the hall. "Thank you," she said. And she meant it, fully, without qualification. "Thank you, Margaret. Go build something wonderful," Margaret said. Her voice was thick. "You always were the best at that." They said goodbye. Claire sat at her desk for a long time after the call ended. The afternoon light moved slowly across her desk. She picked up her pen. She opened her notebook to a clean page. She wrote at the top 14 new inquiries. Then she started writing notes for the spring calendar. "You built this. It was always yours. The rest was just weather." She worked until 7. Then she went home. Nathaniel called at 4 the following afternoon. Claire was at Merritt and Company, reviewing venue diagrams for a March event. When her phone lit up with a New York number, she recognized the way you recognize certain things. Before you are ready to. With the body before the mind. She looked at it for 3 full rings. Then she answered. "Hi, Nate," she said. A pause. Short. "Hi," he replied. His voice was the same. She had been curious about that in an abstract way, whether it would still sound familiar or whether time would have made it neutral. It was familiar. Not warmly, not the way Cole's voice was warm. Just familiar. The specific cadence of a voice you spent 4 years listening to. "I heard from my mother," he said. "I know," Claire replied. "She called me first." "Of course she did," he said. And there was something very brief in his voice that might have been affection. For Margaret. For the specific quality of his mother's loyalty to a woman he had stopped deserving. "I did not know you were the planner. I want to be clear about that." "I know," she replied. "I believe you." "Vanessa did not know," he said. He stopped, started again. "The posts were inappropriate. I am deeply sorry about the posts." "Your attorney should be talking to my attorney about the posts," she said. He will be, Nathaniel replied. A pause. Claire, she waited. How are you, he asked. 2 words. The question that meant everything and very little, depending on who asked it and why. She thought about the bathroom floor, about the yellow onesies folded in the dark, about Cole's hand on her shoulder at 1 in the morning and the specific weight of it, steady and present and not demanding anything. About the 14 inquiries and the vendor calls and the 48-hour breach window. About the morning she had felt, for the first time in a very long time, entirely like herself. I am well, she said. And then after a moment, I am genuinely, actually well, Nate. I am better than I have been in a while. Another pause. I am glad, he said, and he sounded like he meant it. She had expected him to sound relieved or uncomfortable or strategic. He sounded like a person who was simply glad to hear that someone he had hurt was okay. How are you, she asked. Because courtesy was a habit and also because she was, in a distant and uncomplicated way, curious. I am, he began. A pause. I am getting married in 2 weeks, apparently, with no florist and a new planner I have never met. He said it with a dry flatness that surprised her. My mother is extremely disappointed in me. Vanessa is managing. I imagine she is, Claire replied. A silence fell between them. It was not comfortable, exactly, but it was honest. It was the silence of 2 people who had known each other very well and had done real damage to each other and were now existing on opposite ends of the same long story. It was not warm, but it was not pretend. And that, she thought, was something. I wanted to say something to you, he said, and I'd not know if now is the right time, or if there is ever a right time for this. She waited. I spent a long time after the divorce telling myself a story about why what happened was, he began. He stopped. I am not going to tell you the story. It does not matter now. What matters is that I knew, when I made the choice I made, that you did not deserve it. And I did it anyway. And I do not have a good explanation for why people do that. Only that people are capable of doing things they know are wrong, and they do them, and the person who gets hurt does not have any obligation to make sense of it. Claire sat very still. No, she said quietly, they do not. I am sorry, he said, for everything that followed too, not just the decision, the way it happened, the things that were said, the things that were not said that should have been. He paused. I know it is late. I know it does not repair anything. It does not, she said. But I hear you, and I accept it. She meant that. She surprised herself by how completely she meant it. Not because it changed anything, not because it undid the gold earring or the bathroom floor or the years of second-guessing herself, but because she had been carrying, without quite knowing it, a small and specific weight, the unanswered question of whether he knew. Whether he understood what his choice had cost her. He knew, he understood. She could set that down now. Goodbye, Nate, she said. Goodbye, Claire, he replied. She hung up. She held the phone in her hand for a long time. Then she set it down on the desk and sat quietly in the office around her. Brenda on a call in the next room, the sound of Donna's keyboard. The city outside the window going on as it always did. She thought about the life she had been afraid was not real. She thought about 2 years of building. The business, the apartment with Cole, the Saturday mornings, the trip to Portugal in the spring where they had eaten dinner on a terrace above the Tagus River. And she had thought, this is the version of life I want forever. And this time when she thought it, it was not a memory. It was a plan. It was already happening. She picked up her phone and called Cole. He answered on the first ring. Hey, he called, she said. A pause. Okay, Cole replied. Are you okay? She thought about it properly. Yes, she said. Actually, yes. A pause. He apologized. I think he meant it. And I think I needed to hear it without knowing I needed to hear it. Okay, Cole said again. Present. Careful. Not trying to fix it. I am good, she said. I will be home by 7. Can we have dinner? I was thinking the soup again, he said. Make it anything but the soup, she replied. Deal, he said. She hung up. She looked at her laptop screen, the venue diagram for the March event. 200 guests. Midtown. Full coordination, 3 more consultations this week, 2 of them from the new inquiry list. She opened the first one. She got back to work. Margaret Hargrove called one last time on a Tuesday evening in December. Cold, properly cold now, the kind of December cold that arrived with wind and the smell of something metallic and clean. Claire was 38 weeks pregnant. She had officially handed off day-to-day management to Donna and Brenda for the next 3 months. She was, for the first time and as long as she could remember, working reasonable hours. She was sitting on the couch reading a novel when the phone rang. I am not going to the wedding, Margaret said without preamble. Claire set her book down. Margaret. It was last month, Margaret said. I did not go. I had an engagement in the Berkshires that I may or may not have manufactured. A pause. I have been thinking about what I wanted to say to you since then. Claire waited. I love my son, Margaret said. I want to be clear about that. I love him and I believe he will figure out, eventually, how to be the man he is capable of being. A pause. But I also think that people reveal themselves through their choices. And the choices Nathaniel made over the course of your marriage told me things about the gaps in his character that I have not been able to unknow. She paused again. And the things you have done since then have told me things about yours. Margaret, Claire said softly. You do not have to say anything, Margaret said. I just wanted you to hear it from someone who watched both things happen. You chose to rebuild. You chose to do the work with integrity. You chose not to burn things down when you had every justification to burn them all the way to the ground. A pause. Those are not small things, Claire. Those are the things that define who you actually are. The December evening was quiet outside the windows. The radiator knocked. Do you hear me, Margaret said. I hear you, Claire replied. Good, Margaret said. A pause. Now go have that baby, and be well. You too, Margaret, Claire said. You too. She held the phone after they hung up. She sat in the quiet December evening, 38 weeks pregnant, in an apartment that was entirely hers, chosen by her, decorated by her, filled with the particular evidence of the life she had built from wreckage and intention and 7 years of showing up for the work. Cole came in from the kitchen. He stopped when he saw her face. Good call, he said, not a question. Good call, she confirmed. He sat next to her. She leaned into him. I have been thinking about something, he said. His voice had a particular quality she had not heard before. Careful, like he was weighing each word before he said it. And I have been trying to figure out the right time to say it. I was going to wait until after the baby. But I keep thinking the right time is probably just. He paused. The right time is whenever I stop waiting for the right time. She tilted her head to look at him. His face was open, present, completely present. He reached into the pocket of his flannel shirt, and she would always remember this. The flannel shirt, the December light coming through the window at a long pale angle, the radiator's familiar knock, and he took out a ring, simple, a thin gold band with one small diamond that sat clean and uncluttered and right, the kind of ring that would look right on a hand that worked. I want to marry you, he said, not because of anything that happened this year, though some of what happened this year reminded me that I did not want to wait anymore. I want to marry you because you are the most specific and precise and determined person I have ever known, and also the most human, and being the person who gets to stand next to you while you build things is the best job I can imagine. He paused. And also you make objectively terrible tea, and I want to make you tea for the rest of my life. Claire looked at him for a long moment. My tea is fine, she said. Your tea is genuinely terrible, he replied. So Claire Merritt. Will you? Yes, she said. I have not actually asked yet. Yes, she said again. Clearer, certain. Yes, Cole. Yes, he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit. She looked at it. One small diamond, one thin gold band. Exactly right. Then she looked at him. You measured, she said. I asked Donna 2 months ago, he replied. You asked Donna 2 months ago. She was very enthusiastic, he said. She cried, and then she told me the exact ring size, and then she said if I ever told you, she cried she would deny it completely and permanently. Claire laughed, full and real and warm in her chest, the kind of laugh that fills a room. She took his face in her hands and kissed him. Outside, December wind moved through the street. The city went on doing what the city always did. The radiator knocked. The apartment held them in its warm and particular December light. Yes, she thought. This is the version of life I want forever. And this time she was completely certain. The baby's name was Clara Frances Whitfield. She arrived on a Tuesday evening in January, 8 pounds and 2 ounces, with Cole's dark hair and Claire's exact expression when she was looking at something she intended to fully understand. She had been in the world for 6 weeks before Claire went back to work. Gradually, on her terms, the way she did everything. The Hospital Foundation Gala was in March. 250 guests, Midtown, spring theme. The first major event of her new professional chapter as Claire Whitfield, née Merritt. She had kept Merritt professionally because Merritt and Company was the name she had built, and it would stay. But her personal name was Whitfield now, and she liked the new shape of it. She arrived at the venue at 3 in the afternoon, the Whitmore Hotel, not the Grand Ballroom, the East Terrace and adjoining rooms on the 4th floor, which she had specifically requested for this event. But she had to walk through the lobby to reach the elevator, through the revolving door, past the white roses she had recommended to the event director years ago. Across the cream marble floor, she had not avoided this. She had simply done what she always did, move through the space that needed to be moved through, with her tablet charged and her binder prepared and her mind on the work ahead. At 4:30, as the setup was nearing completion, and the afternoon light was becoming the particular gold that meant evening was an hour away, she walked downstairs. She was not entirely sure why. She did not make a deliberate decision about it. She simply found herself in the elevator pressing the button for the lobby level and then crossing the lobby and then standing outside the closed double doors of the Grand Ballroom. She pushed them open. The room was empty. Set up for an event on the weekend. Round tables in white linens, chairs stacked along the walls. The chandeliers at their daytime level, cool and still. The cream and gold marble floor. The 40-foot ceiling with its gold trim catching the last of the afternoon light through the 3 east windows. She walked in, her footsteps on the marble, sharp and deliberate, getting louder in the still air. She crossed to the center of the room. She had been in this room as a bride. She had stood in this exact center and felt her heart catch at how beautiful everything was. She had been in this room as a professional, as the person running the machinery behind the beauty. She had been in this room as a woman being dismissed by someone who never bothered to learn her name. She was in this room now as something else. Something that did not have a single word for it, but was made of all of those things, and also of the 6 weeks she had spent getting to know Clara Francis, and of the Tuesday she had said yes in a December living room while wearing a ring that fit, and of Margaret Hargrove's voice saying, "Go build something wonderful," and of Donna's laugh and Arthur's satisfaction and 14 inquiries and 31 inquiries, and Brenda sorting them by priority and Tom Bentley asking about the business before talking about the menu. She walked to the east wall, near the service entrance, the exact place where she had stood when Vanessa Caldwell had told her, in front of witnesses, that she was not necessary. She put her palm flat against the marble, cool, smooth, the exact temperature and texture she remembered. She stood there for a long moment. She tried to find the feeling from that October afternoon, the specific cold that had settled in her chest when the heels clicked toward her on the marble and she saw what was coming before it arrived. The particular practiced stillness of standing in a room where someone had already decided what category to put you in. She looked for that feeling carefully. She searched for it with intention. It had moved very far away. She stayed in that spot for 2 more minutes. Then she took her hand off the wall. She turned back toward the room. The light was extraordinary. It always had been at this hour. The way the chandeliers in the windows worked together to make the air itself seem golden. She had noticed it on her wedding day and she was noticing it now. The same light. The same room, only she had changed. She walked out of the grand ballroom and across the lobby and into the elevator. She pressed 4. On the east terrace, her team was finishing the flower arrangements. 140 white roses, exactly calibrated to the warmth of the room. The lighting warmed to specification, the table placement yielding perfect sightlines from every seat. Brenda looked up when she walked in. "Everything is on track," Brenda said. "Caterer arrives in 40 minutes. String quartet is setting up in the corner room." "The real string quartet this time," Donna said. From behind a floral arrangement she was adjusting by approximately 1 centimeter. "Carol Fisher," Claire confirmed. "The best," Donna replied. She looked over the flowers at Claire. There was a look on her face, the oldest friend look, the one that could read the exact temperature of a room Claire had just come from. "You okay?" "Yes," Claire replied. "You went to the ballroom," Donna said. "I did," Claire replied. And Donna asked. Claire looked around the east terrace, the white roses, the crystal tableware, the warm light of a March evening beginning to settle outside the tall windows. 140 roses and a string quartet and a foundation gala that was going to run flawlessly because her team knew exactly what they were doing. "It is just a room," she said. Donna nodded slowly. "It is just a room," Donna agreed. Claire set her binder on the event table. She checked her watch. 2 hours and 20 minutes to doors. "Let us finish this," she said. The gala ran flawlessly. 250 people in a room full of white roses and string music and the warm, organized hum of an event that knew exactly what it was supposed to be. The foundation director gave a speech that made 6 people cry. The cocktail hour ran 15 minutes long because the guests were enjoying themselves too much to move to dinner, and Claire adjusted the timeline smoothly without anyone noticing. At 10:30, as the last guests were moving toward the coat room, the foundation director found Claire near the service entrance. "This was extraordinary," she said. "Whatever you charge for spring events, double it." "Do not encourage her," Donna said from 2 feet away. "I will have Brenda send you our spring availability," Claire replied. She watched the last guests leave. She watched her team begin the breakdown. Careful, efficient, the way she had trained them. She stood near the terrace windows for a moment and looked at the March night outside. The city lit and moving and indifferent and entirely beautiful. In 6 hours, Clara Francis would wake up and demand to eat. Cole would bring Claire tea in the wrong temperature, the way he always did, and she would drink it because it was made with good intentions. The morning would be the morning. The work would continue. The life she had built from its own wreckage would continue to be built. She looked at the ring on her hand, the simple gold band, the one clear diamond. She picked up her bag. She walked out of the East Terrace and into the elevator and down through the lobby, past the white roses, across the cream marble floor, through the revolving door, into the March night. Cold and sharp and smelling like rain and the particular aliveness of a city at 11 in the evening. She thought about the woman who had stood in the parking garage on level 3 of this hotel and counted 11 minutes before she was ready to call anyone. She thought about the bathroom floor, the yellow onesies folded in the dark, the baby's kick, hard and certain 3 times. She thought about the first sentence she had ever written in the journal she started after the divorce. The sentence she had read every morning for 6 weeks until she no longer needed the reminder. I am not helpless. She had been right. She had always been right. She had just needed the time to prove it to herself the way the important things always need proving. Without witnesses, without applause, in parking garages and bathroom floors and late-night kitchen tables and the quiet accumulation of doing the work correctly one day after another. The city moved around her. She walked to her car. She went home. She had lost the marriage. She had lost the certainty. She had almost lost herself in the middle of both, but she had never lost the work. The work was always hers, and now, so was everything else.